So this is a 360 camera test that I'm doing right now. I'm going to have a little walk around my local area just to give you a bit of an idea of the setup. So I've got the Insta360 X4 on a short invisible handheld stick. We're shooting 8K at 25 frames in auto exposure. So it's a very bright day, so as I come out into the sunshine, it's so bright I can barely kind of see. But it should be adjusting the exposure automatically. Now, in addition to the camera and the stick, I've got a little audio adapter going into a Rode Wireless Pro. And the receiver is already on it. I'm interested to see whether you can actually see it from the 360 camera or whether it makes it invisible, because that's what this setup is kind of meant to do. I've got a transmitter in my pocket with a lav mic going up here, this little windshield on it. So all the audio should be coming from here. But what I'm doing is, in addition to it hopefully recording directly into the camera, what I'm also doing is I'm recording on board, so I can always sort of sync the audio from the device to the video device afterwards. I'm shooting in standard video mode, not in the HDR mode. The reason why I've decided to do that is because you're meant to get more stabilization with the standard video mode, where with the HDR mode, that probably works better when the camera is static and it's high, it's kind of basically a high dynamic range. So it's a better way of grading the highlights and the lows, but not necessarily good if the camera's moving around loads. So right now I'll just do a little bit of a twirl. Hopefully that should clear quite steady. When I was walking, you might notice a little bit of bob on the Z axis. You know, most people, they don't walk too much. The camera does this, which can be create a bit of motion sickness. But as I'm walking, it should feel hopefully steady. I've also set this to D-Warp. So there's 3 types of 360 video mode, from Mega, Ultra Wide, and D-Warp. Now D-Warp's meant to be better for vlogging, and it's all to do with how it stitches in. It's kind of a distortion thing. It's meant to be less distorted with people talking like this. And the final thing I'll probably mention is that to stitch the 2 shots, there has to obviously be stitch lines. Now, when I filmed before and I've looked at the LCD screen, the stitch seems to have gone right through the middle. So I'm not sure how that works, but I'm going to see if I flip that way around. That's interesting. If I do that way. So I flipped it now so I can see where I'm going, but I'm going to circle it back round. That's interesting. So I'm not really sure where the stitch marker is. Right now it's showing me a sort of 360 circle. And then if I hit the other one, it's showing me the other way, two little lines. I can still see them myself, but I'm not really sure how that works. And then if I do, so there's picture in picture. That's quite useful. So within that mode, I could see, for example, I'll turn it and see where I'm going. And I can see myself, but I don't know whether that's recording that in camera, so I'm going to turn that off and whiz that back around again. So it's a lovely sunny day, so exposure wise I shouldn't have that many issues. I'm interested to know how well the audio works. So right now on the Rode Go, the audio is going up to about sort of 75%, which I'm going to take a guess is probably around something like maybe minus 15 dB. 1 2 1 2, so there I'm a bit louder. 1 2 1 2, I'm just about hitting the red, which is usually around about that kind of minus 5 dB. But right now as I'm talking, maybe minus 10 dB. I'm interested to know whether the wind comes in. We'll find out. So walkie, walkie, walkie. Now I've just come over to a section where there's just a car park. And I want to put the camera down. Now, right now we don't have any lens guards on the camera, so I don't want to leave it unsupervised too much, but I can extend the camera using this stick, and then I can, I'm not going to trust that too much. Tell you what I'll do. I'm going to put it just out of the wind. Now, this stand only goes up about maybe 3.5 feet, something like that. So looking at it, it's about there on me. Whereas usually I would try and put it a little bit higher, That wind does make me a bit nervous. It's definitely a windy one today. So let's try some distance things, okay? So 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot. So these are that's 6 steps. Take another one. So I'm about sort of 6 feet away from the camera at the moment. So it's set up at about this height. And the idea I want to test here is that when you film something like this, how does it actually appear in terms of viewing distance for the audience, both in VR but also in a cave system? Now there's also a little bit of wobble because of the wind, so I'm thinking when we do anything static like this, well worth probably maybe bringing a sandbag or some kind of additional weights. But as we move around, I'm trying to stay on an arcing turn, still about 6 feet away. When I walk around here as well, you hopefully still hear me nice and clearly, but I can be walking and talking. I can be moving further away. So the distance is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I was about 18 feet away then. If we say play really close, 1, 2, 3, about 4. Yeah. So interesting, the screen goes on off after 5 minutes as well. I wonder whether I can bring that back on without ruining the recording. Oh, there we go. So I'm just tapping that button on the front. So I'm only about 4 feet away from right now, but I don't know how it kind of really looks in terms of, say, that height perception, because we don't want me to be too high or too low. I personally think that probably something around about 5, 6 feet probably is going to work quite well, because you can see the floor, and if you're in a cave system, I want to be on the walls. I don't want part of my body to be projected on the floor, because then it's kind of weird, like my legs sticking out. So anyway, that's something to consider about. The other interesting thing is the physical idea that, oh, how does this work? There we go, back up. That with the extension, I can still shoot 360 if I lay the camera horizontal and I push it out like that. Now this is quite handy because it gives that extra bit of distance. Now it does look a bit weird because my arm's sticking out, so maybe I can hold it a little bit more like this. And it might wobble a little bit more, but hopefully with the stabilization, it doesn't look too bad. So let's keep walking, and I'm going to just try doing a bit of stuff to camera with the extra extension. Interesting to see how it adjusts when I go into the shade now from a lighting point of view. Like I say, usually the problem is never really filming outside. The issues come when you film inside. I took this camera to a bowling alley recently, and it was very underlit, very kind of grungy and, you know, kind of cool and urban. But naturally the quality reduces because the camera's exposure settings are put to the maximum, so you lose sharpness and quality. It's another reason why I'm filming in 8K, because this camera doesn't actually shoot in true 8K. It's just slightly under it. So what I have to do is I have to scale the video up just a little bit, only by about 5%, to hit that true 8K. And that means then when it's uploaded to YouTube, it's in 8K, not 4K formatting. So let's have a little wander around here. Now, I can go really low, and that's gonna look a little bit strange. Now, obviously, usually when cameras are lowered to the ground, and certainly when they're moving, you get a different sense of movement, opposed to when we go up high in the air, like that. So that's now lifted almost right above my head. And that should feel quite different as we're walking along. But from this angle, it's worth noting, sorry, you can't hear that because of the plane overhead. From this angle, it's worth noting that if it were on a cave system right now, I would assume that I'm going to be on the floor. I'm not going to be projected on the walls and projected on the floor. And just as if it was down that low, I'm going to assume I'm going to be maybe on the ceiling, which there are no projectors on the ceiling in the cave systems. So that's not really good. So as a general rule, something around about eye line, again, I would assume it is okay. But if it's too close, you're only going to get my head and shoulders on the wall and the rest of my body's going to be down, which is why that whole idea of having a good sort of 6 feet or so is quite useful. Let's have a little look down here. The other thing that kind of intrigues me as well is when you get into tighter spaces, the idea of how, so right now, this feels way more intimate, hopefully already. Things are passing the camera at much closer proximity. It is a lovely day. So if we're going on a tour, do I hold the camera like this, at an outstretched pace? Do I hold it like this? And can I turn around and look at my environment? Or do I do it as I did before and hold it at a much further outstretch, which to be fair, some venues might not be too keen on. But certainly if I'm making myself a focus point, as opposed to, I could just hold it really tight. And if I'm doing a cave where I'm only really focused on 270 degrees, I could argue that actually even putting it right in front of my face like that, now you don't really want to see my ugly mug, but if that part of my face is the fourth wall of the cave, which doesn't exist, I could argue, is the rest of this shot pretty clean and safe? As I'm walking through on this uneven, slightly muddy, slippy ground, how does the shot feel as I hold it with two hands and grip it quite close to my body, as opposed to having it on a long stick, which is going to bob a lot more like a seesaw. So these are all interesting things for us to think about. In terms, oh, I'm not going to go that far. Look how muddy that gets. Whenever I want to look down at some detail, like a bit of machinery. Whenever I want to look right down on that flower. Let's have a look and turn it around. Just to pretend that's a bit of detail that I really want to look at and pause on for a second.